There's a lot of voices that we can hear, that we can tell ourselves about who we are or about who we should be. And some of these voices, they're very loud, they're very powerful, they're very forceful, and then some of them are more subtle, they're more just received or something like that. They're subtle. And we can spend so much of our energy trying to build up or trying to protect a certain image of ourselves, or like what we do or how we appear or what others think of us. We can try and build up or protect this image, and we can do this through our work, through pursuing things like our work, through our relationships, or through what we're good at or something like that. And in some way, we can start to build our whole identities around these things. But the truth is that they're fragile. They don't last forever. When I was in middle school, I used to be pretty good at track. I could actually run pretty fast, believe it or not, especially sprinting, the 100, the 200, it was pretty good. And at that point, I was building my identity around track, around being fast, being one of the fastest people in the school. And it's like, well, if I'm fast, then people are going to like me. But if I'm not, then what am I going to do? And so, as time goes on, you just start to become slower, you know? And it's the same with all of these things. We start to lose these things, and we can start to put our identities in them. Or we can shift our focus into something else. Well, if I'm not good at track, then maybe I'll be able to make a lot of money, and then my identity will be in that. So we can build our identities around these things that are passing, these things that are temporary, these things that aren't really a solid foundation. And the spiritual life, it kind of centers around this one question. I used to kind of think that the spiritual life was like a progression that God would do, where it's like, okay, the Lord works on this vice, and then he goes to this vice, and then he goes to this vice, and that one, and it's just gradual upwards. But in reality, it's more so like deep, going down, down, down into one specific theme is one of the strongest that he tries to work into our souls. The theme of our identity. Where do we get our identity from? Do we get it from the world? Do we get it from ourselves? Or do we get it from the evil one or from God? Where is the source of our identity? And it's by entering into this that's how we live. Because it's from what we believe about ourselves, it's from our identity that we live, that everything else flows from that, including how we see God and how we see him. And he says today, "My sheep hear my voice." Because the truth is, we're all listening to voices. We are all listening to different voices in the world and in our lives, and not all of the voices that we let into our souls, into our minds, are from God. Some of the voices that we listen to are from ourselves, and some of them are from the enemy. And so, what we listen to mostly, it can help inform our identities, how God sees us. And so if we listen mostly to our own voice, the voice of ourselves, we can start to build up our identity around self-protection or self-promotion or stuff like that. We can start to live out of fear or pride. We can tell ourselves, don't get too close to anyone because they could hurt you. We could be living out of fear. Or our pride could tell us you have to prove yourself in order to be worth something. You have to prove it. You have to earn it. And in order to do that, then you'll be valuable. We can do that in 1,000 different ways. And the result of living from the voice of ourself, is we can have a fragile identity. An identity that is constantly shifting based on external circumstances or on our own emotions. What's going on? Am I successful right now, or am I not? And is track going well, or is it not? We can build this identity around this self-protection or self-promotion. And it essentially means that you become the one responsible for defining and maintaining your identity. And this is heavy, to live this way, to live people-pleasing or something like that, and it can be exhausting and it can be a burden. But the second voice that we can listen to is worse than that, the voice of the enemy. We can let this voice enter into our minds, and we can start to live out of this place, out of this voice that forms our identity and how we see ourselves. We can build, if we're listening to the voice of the enemy primarily, we can start to build our identity based on shame, based on fear, or based on despair. And we can start to feel like you're a failure, you're unlovable, and God is tired of you. God doesn't want to deal with you anymore because you failed so much. And those lies, when we believe them, when we let them echo in our minds, they start to form a part of our identity. We start to wear them. They start to form us in a way. And not because it's true, but because we hear it so often, not externally, but inside our own minds. We can let it echo, and it can start to damage, consume, and get stuck, pulled down. And that's why Satan is called the accuser. He's the one who accuses us. He lays before us our sin and our weakness, not so much as a conviction to repent, but more out of this is where you need to live by, because this is who you are. You are weak, you are sinful, and that's all you are. And he can start to, crush down the mind, the accuser. But we can listen to our own voice, self-promotion, self-protection. We can listen to the voice of the enemy, the shame, despair, hopelessness, that voice. But we can also listen to the voice of God. And when we start to listen to the voice of God and live out of his voice, forming our identity as sons and daughters, that's when we begin to understand our true identity. We begin to understand, we hear, you are loved, you're forgiven, I am with you. You are not what you've done, but you are mine. And we can live out of this freedom, this identity, because it's not something that's earned, that's something that we need to perform in order to receive from God, but it's something that is freely given. God freely gives us this identity. We don't earn it. Even by being good Catholics, we don't even earn it, but we just receive it through his grace. And so the more that we listen to God, the more that we let God affirm us in our true identity, the more we start to believe that we're children of God, that we are his sons and his daughters. And that starts to form and lead our lives. Not ourselves, our self-promotion, self-protection, not the enemy, the shame, despair, but the voice of God, the freedom, the peace, the love. And we start to build our lives on love, not on fear. And we start to form our lives on trust, not on performance. And so, because we receive that identity from God, we don't need to strive to create ourselves into something else, into being loved or liked. But when we hear the voice of the shepherd, that's how he builds our identity in him, by listening to his voice, not in lies, not in ourselves, but in him. And our identity stops blowing with the wind, but it starts to be firm in the Lord. And that firmness gives such a freedom in life, a peace that is from God, because he is the source of our identity. And it's said in the book of Revelation, "For the Lamb who is in the center of the throne will shepherd them and lead them to springs of life-giving water." So this life-giving water, the Lamb in the center of the throne, the center of the heart, living from that identity, that's how we're called to live. And in order to hear the voice of the shepherd, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me." In order to hear the voice of the shepherd, in order to hear him affirm our identity as sons and daughters of God, we need to give God the space to speak. Give him a place where he's able to tell us the truth. Because if we don't, then will other things, the things of the world, ourselves, the things of the enemy, will start to speak in our minds, and we'll start to live from that identity. So we need to let God in to affirm in the truth. And so this is what prayer is all about. Letting God speak to us, be with us, affirm us in his love and his grace. Because prayer is a need. It's not just a good thing to do, because it's actually a need. Because when we are affirmed by the Lord, he's able to enter in, and we're able to live from that place. Because if we don't learn to recognize the voice of God, we'll start living from the voice of ourselves or the enemy, the voice of performance, the voice of protection, or the voice of fear and shame or despair. And so my encouragement for all of us is to remember to pray, to give God the time, to give God the space to be able to speak, so that we would recognize his voice. And maybe you want to pray with scripture. Maybe that's how you'll recognize his voice. Maybe silence at home, maybe inside of the adoration chapel, but making space for God to speak, to affirm our identities as sons and daughters of God. Because God's voice, it brings clarity, not confusion, and it brings peace, not pressure, and conviction, not condemnation. But the more we listen to the voice of God, the more that we listen, are attentive to him, the more he's able to speak and dispel the lies in our souls. In time, our hearts will find rest. The more that we listen to the voice of God, the more of rest our souls will find, and the more free we become from ourselves, from our own voice within, and from the voice of the enemy. Because we'll learn how to know, how to recognize, and how to follow the voice of God, the more space we make for him to speak. "My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me."